It's my pleasure to introduce Zadok. He is a professor emeritus of Mesopotamian, Iranian, and Judaic studies at the Institute of Archaeology of Tel Aviv University. He studied at the universities of Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Cambridge. He specializes in the history and philology of the Fertile Crescent, especially Mesopotamia and of Western Iran, mainly, but not exclusively, between 1200 and 330 BCE. He has worked on numerous cuneiform tablets from first millennium Babylonia, which are housed in museums and collections in Europe and the US. He has participated in two mega projects, namely the Tübinger Atlas des Vorderen Orients in Tübingen and the Iranisches Personennamenbuch, Vienna. He has authored and co-authored 15 books and about 300 articles and reviews. And he really needs no introduction, but one must introduce people. His presentation today is titled Issues Pertaining to the Judean Exiles in Pre-Hellenistic Babylonia. So welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Tony, also for your very important help, technical help. And I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to commemorate my teacher, Professor Shaked, who taught me Old and Middle Iranian, and also Arabic translations of lost Pahlavi treatises. His courses were attended by students, not only by students, but also by established scholars, like Joseph Mabe, for example, and others. Now, I discuss here two main issues. First, the reconstruction of reliable statistical sample of the Judean exiles in Babylonia between 597 and 331 BCE, and this will be preceded by a survey of Yahvistic names, individuals bearing Yahvistic names in early Israel and Judah, found in situ. I only collected the material which was found in situ, not the debt from the material from the antiquity dealers, which is, of course, you have to prove that it's original in order to compile and to calculate a statistical sample. Second, plausible scenarios and loci of Judeo-Iranian encounters, theological impact in a period of crisis. The problem of reconstructing a reliable and fairly comprehensive prosopographical sample of the Judeans in pre-Hellenistic Babylonia was tackled by me in a monograph on this subject 20 years ago, when I was able to isolate 160 individuals from Babylonia who can be considered Judeans, with various degrees of plausibility. Fortunately, this number now is more than double, thanks to the new material from Yahudu, which was published by Lori and Wunsch. From Yahudu and other settlements, which were linked to this Judean colony. Almost 100 additional documents, including 190 additional individuals. I understand that Cornelia is going to publish even more documents. She published, but I haven't seen the book. But I understand that there might be more individuals, because some individuals were already listed in the published version in the index of the published version of Kusas 28. But I hope that there are more there, because she has got some new material from Iraq. Moreover, the additional material is much more statistically compact, as it has an impressive density of attestations. This material is subjected to a thorough socioeconomic analysis in a recent monograph of Alstola, written in Helsinki, and then from 2 years ago. However, the aim of reaching a reliable and comprehensive statistical pool of the Judean exiles is not tackled by him. Well, I'm not going to belittle what he did because he did an excellent job, but there are, since then, there were published some more attestations. For example, Zawadzki published a long list of people from Hindanu, and some of them are Yavistic names. They probably came from down the Chabur, and then down the Euphrates, Middle Euphrates, to Sipar, after the fall of Assyria. Because the Chabur was, the lower Chabur at least, was conquered by Babylonia. So they came, they were recruited for work in the Babar temple in Sipar, which was on the border between Babylonia and the Middle Euphrates region, Suhu. In order to reach a reliable statistical pool, it is imperative to compare the enlarged and updated material from Babylonia to that from Judah, the country of origin of the exiles, before the deportation, deportations, of course, 2 deportations at least, namely in the long 7th century BCE, from 700 to 586 BCE. It should be pointed out that very few Yavistic names are recorded in the scanty epigraphic material from Israel and Judah, which is datable before 800 BCE. So, of course, I have to rely on a statistical pool, statistical sample from the last generations of Judah, because the deportees came from the end of the long 7th century. But I give here a survey of the occurrences and percentages of the Yavistic names in earlier periods. All these calculations are based, and samples are based on epigraphic material which was found in situ. I don't use the biblical evidence, the biblical prosopography, of course. I want to give an independent datable and localized evidence. Now, just 10 individuals with preserved given names and partially with paternal names are mentioned before 800 BC. That's the whole sample, not only the Yavistic names. And there are altogether 16 names before 800 BC. They include, these 16 names or individuals have only 2 individuals with Yavistic names. As you know, the inscription from Tel Dan, has the names of two kings. Although although they are not quite intact, they are also to some extent reconstructed. But still, the reconstruction is very plausible. So this is a very low percentage of Yavistic names at the beginning of the period. The earliest extra, well, but I have to warn you, because the sample is too small, of course, and then it originates not from the heartland of the Israelite Judeans. Most of it stems not from the heartland of the Israel Judeans. That's to say from the limestone massif of Palestine, from the central mountain range, but which starts in Mount Hebron and ends in Galilee. but from the valley of what I call Greater Esdraelon. That's to say the valley of Jezreel and the valley of Beit Shan, which of course everybody knows it was a Canaanite, originally a Canaanite region, and the Canaanites existed there as a political element, as a political factor, relatively late. This sample stems mostly from Beit Shan excavations and from excavation in Rehov, with some scattered material nearby. The earliest extra-biblical mention of Yahweh is his temple in Nevo, which is recorded in the Mesha inscription. About now they lowered the date. It's 830. It's about 830 BC. Before and they thought it's a bit earlier. I don't mention the single accounts of Yahweh in an Egyptian source probably from Mount Seir, because it has a very long gap with this documentation. No. It can be envisaged that the cult of Yahweh was transmitted to Nevo in the inheritance of Reuben, traditionally the senior tribe of the Israelite proto-history, who settled northwest of Moab via the highway or royal way, Derech HaMelech, which connected northern Hijaz, namely Midian, the Chisma, and the Edom with Moab, and the adjacent Reubenite territory. This is a modified version of Not, because Not was of the opinion he reconstructed this way. He just read it the other way around. The itinerary in the book of Numbers. He read it the other way. He started from Moab, and then he went down all the way to Edom. But it might have started in Midian, I don't know. Just to be on the safe side, I start with Midian because it's south of Edom, and then Chisma. Another way which linked Edom and the north was a westbound one. This was an eastbound one, via Transjordan, as I said, from Moab, or the steppes of Moab, the Reubenite territory, Nevo, the Mount Nevo, all the way down via east of Moab, and then to Edom and Midian, Chisma and Midian. And now there is also a westbound way, which linked Edom and the north, namely from Eilat to Gaza via Kuntilet Ajrut. This we happen to know only several decades ago because of the publication of the new material from there. Ancient Teiman. In northern Sinai, but still it's politically northern Sinai, northeast Sinai, but still it's within the Edomite orbit. The Teiman is within the Edomite orbit. It has become a vessel. Edom has become a vessel of Judah, while the latter was practically subordinate to the northern kingdom of Israel. The cult spread to Israelite territory from Edom and Sinai primarily via both Transjordan and the Negev. No wonder that a very tight concentration of Yahvistic names is, first of all, the earliest tight concentration of Yahvistic names is encountered in Kuntilet Ajrut, unlike the material from which I mentioned before, the 16 names, which is negligible. Where the itinerant, in that point, in that station, commercial station, the itinerant merchants of this commercial the itinerant mentioned of this station worshipped also the Yahweh of Samaria and also the Yahweh of Taiman. The percentage of Yahwistic anthroponyms steadily increased towards the end of the first temple period. Of the 160 individuals from Israel and Judah before 700, before the Sennacherib campaign and the big deportation of Judeans, it reaches a much higher percentage. Could you switch the? I think it's now number two. Number two. I gave the statistics. Yeah, you see, it reaches a much higher percentage. The Yahwistic names. 2 to 1. Yeah, you see it. There are very few other elements in these names. Many of these names are just profane names, and some of them have what they call ancestral elements, like Av, and those are not evidence for real deities. They are ancestral names. Kinship terms. Yeah, they are kinship terms. Most of the first elements, apart from Yahweh, in this documentation, are just kinship terms, not other gods like Baal. Baal almost disappeared from this documentation. Of course, there is El, but El is, of course, ambiguous. He could be identified in this milieu with Yahweh. There is also some interchange. There's also some interchange in the name of the same person, at least in Babylonia, we see. It's between Yahweh and Yahweh is written Dingermesh, so Ilu. With pluralis majestatis. But during the 7th century, in Judah, the percentage becomes even higher. It reaches 47-22. Well, I said it, but the percentage in 700 BC was only 42-94. So 5% more in the long 7th century. It's not that significant, but still, I think it has some meaning. This sample of material, which was found mostly in situ, updates that which was presented by Tigay in 36 years ago. He wrote, "You shall have no other God," also based mostly on epigraphical sources. And then he calculated the percentage of Yahwistic names. But now there is much more material from excavations. In view of the archaeological find, it may be concluded that the pre-exilic Yahwism was practically monolatric henotheistic and not devoid of idolatrous traits. But I am not going to elaborate on this issue. Since I concentrate on extra biblical evidence, it should be mentioned that also the religion of the Elephantine Jews, who reached Egypt sometime during the long 7th century BCE, is not strictly exclusive Yahwism. This was discussed here. The relatively rich documentation on the Judean exiles in Babylonia is exclusively socioeconomic and doesn't contain any information about their religious practices. Once they believed that they didn't write any documents on Sabbath, but this in the new documentation from Yahudu has some documents which were issued on Sabbath, and they are witnessed by Judeans. So we don't see a very strict observance of Sabbath in those. This is the only thing you can tell about the religion, apart from the names. It is not without interest that the Judean Bel Shara Utsur has become the official name of the palatial functionary, Yahu Shara Utsur, in pre-Achaemenid Babylonia. This may hint at an identification of Yahu with Baal as the head of the pantheon. Baal was identified with Marduk in Babylonia. If this is not just an interpretatio Babyloniaca, then it is again an argument against an exclusive Yahwism. Now, Dingir N, it's not written Baal, but it's written Dingir N. Dingir N, the determinative D, Dingir, and the NN stands, renders Baal, as we happen to know, from at least one rendering of Phoenician name. There is Dingir En Yatunu, Bel Yaton. It must stand for it must stand for Baal Yaton, because the second element is Phoenician. It's analogous to this one. In short, there is no extra biblical evidence that Yahwism evolved into strict monotheism before the Achaemenid period. Here I shall avoid a discriminate aggregate of an Israelite Judean prosopographical sample, but aim at a statistical comparison between the percentage of the Yahwistic names in the prosopographical pool from Judah of the long 7th century BCE and that of the Neo and late Babylonian pool between 572 and 477 BCE. Now you can switch, you can, number 3. Yeah. Out of 190 individuals, almost 74% bear Yahwistic names from Yahudu and its environs. This must be an excessive percentage, because as we happen to know, in Judah it reaches hardly 50%, but it was the main deity, the main first element. But this is I'm here. I find myself in a vicious circle, admittedly, because how did I calculate these? How did I isolate the Judeans? How did I isolate the Judeans among the plethora of other names? Because Neo and late Babylonian have probably no less than 100,000 names, different names, or different individuals, if not more. But this is because of the Yahwistic name, mostly. Here and there are some other names, Shabbataya, for example, which is a bit disputed, but now in the context suggests that it is a Judean. It's very few exclusively Hebrew names by purely linguistic criteria, not strictly theological criteria. So the main criterion is theological, and because the Judeans in Judah, in the last generations before the exile, we don't happen to find any we find almost no other deities except for what I mentioned, kinship terms, and El, which is neutral. It's difficult to find and isolate non-Yahwistic names referring to Jews, to Judeans in Babylonia. But the statistical sample strongly suggests that there probably was no less than additional 70, well, no less than additional 70 or so in the documentation from the Judean colony and its region. Of course, this is arbitrary, but still, the Judean colony was founded by Judeans. It was named after Judeans. We happen to know that there is at least one, even 3 Tyrians there, and at least one indigenous clan. because there is, I'll talk about it, I'll get to it, because there is a marriage contract. And I have an explanation why they are there, the indigenous ones, in a colony of foreigners. Because the Babylonians, unlike the Assyrians, had no intentional policy of mixing the exiles. The exiles settled apparently in their own colonies, because we happen to we find places named after Ashkelonites, Philistines, in general, Palashtu, Gazans, Gaza, Chazatu, and other, also Tyrians, Bitsuraya. Yeah. And also other people from more remote areas. Parisaya, Persians. Yeah. I mean that by adding the 70 or even 80 crypto-Judeans, is very important to bear in mind, crypto-Judeans, from the Yahudu documentation, wherever it lacks evidence to the contrary, will obtain the same percentage as in Judah at the time of the deportations. Yahudu Judah, being named after the country of its capital Jerusalem, was a Judean colony, but this does not mean that it was inhabited exclusively by Judeans. They surely were the overwhelming majority there, but one explicit Tyrian, Tzuraya, is recorded that in 517 BCE, together with another two individuals who were perhaps Phoenicians as well. This is because of linguistic considerations. They might have settled in Yahudu one generation after the Judeans, presumably after the conquest of rebellious Tyre by Nebuchadnezzar II. It took one more generation, about 20-25 years, to conquer Tyre. The Babylonians, after a long siege, took Tyre. One generation after the first deportation of the Judeans. And probably the deportation took place after the conquest, so sometime after the conquest. This is, of course, a conjecture. I don't know when they were. It is not so documented. We just find them in 517, but there is no point to suggest that they came earlier in the conquest of Tyre. Yeah. This is now. There are also, as I said, several Arameans and other people indigenous to Babylonia in Yahudu. This is demonstrated by a marriage contract concluded by two parties belonging to the non-urban component of the indigenous Babylonian society, who resided in Yahudu in 533 BCE. The bride's family was not only of a low social status, but also poor. The bride doesn't bring with him any dowry for the bridegroom. Therefore, it's very likely that it's a criterion, an established criterion, because we have many marriage documents, dowry documents, that do have dowries, and there is it's not a coincidence, of course. The contract was concluded between the groom Nabu ban Achi, son of Kina, this is a purely Akkadian name, filiation, a purely Akkadian filiation, and Tibi, daughter of Dana, the mother of the bridegroom Nana Kanat. Here they are Arameans. They are not Canaanite Judean. Canaanite. The names are definitely not Canaanite, but Babylonianized Aramaic names. The other party. One party is Akkadian, one with Akkadian names, one party is with Aramaic names. But this is no much significance. What is significant here, and the criterion for labeling them as low status, which doesn't mean in all cases that they were poor, but in this case they were poor because of the lack of dowry. The criterion for negating the origin, the urbanite origin, membership in a urbanite community, urbanite class, is that they bear no surname. This is an absolute. This is an absolute criterion. There are some exceptions. For example, if a person occurs several times, usually a scribe, which must have in most cases a surname, because they belong to the elite of the urbanites. They were Akkadian scribes, the bearers of the Akkadian culture and heritage. If they are mentioned several times, you can find them sometimes without the surname. The surname is omitted in the same corpus, in the same archive, because the other documents of the same archive do mention the surname. Now, why do we find this family in the Judean colony, an indigenous family or clan? Well, it was issued in the presence of Mushallam, the bride's brother, thereby indicating his consent to the marriage in the absence of her father. So they were non-urbanite, poor, and also a single mother. So the brother, of course, this is atypical. He is not mentioned in the operative section, but in a postscript. But still, because he is not a witness, and he's not in the operative section, but he is mentioned. They didn't forget to mention him, to list him in the postscript, because we can conclude from this listing, it's not meaningless, that in the absence of the father in an Oriental society, in a Babylonian society, the brother, when the mother, in families with a single mother, the brother, if there were such, he was responsible for his sister. He was the only male in the family, after all. No less than 7 out of, both siblings are mentioned without paternal names. So this may hint at the situation that this was a single mother, because the paternal names are not mentioned. Paternal names are mentioned also if the fathers are dead. They are not parties. But here there is no mention of them. Although this is usually the norm to list the people with filiations. So, no less than 7 out of the 8 witnesses to the contract were Judeans, very probably neighbors and colleagues of the parties. This is the common pattern. Who is a witness to a contract? There are parties and there are witnesses. The witnesses have nothing to do with the transaction, of course, but they have a connection to the parties, to both parties. Some of them have a connection to one party, to party A, and some of them, and the rest of them have a connection, are connected, are linked to the party B, to the second party. Here they are all Judeans, except for one. They are all Judeans. This is even more efficient, because they don't belong to any party. These witnesses. But this is not the main point, what I'm driving at. This is understandable, as the settlement had a Judean majority. Therefore, they recruited it's natural that they recruited the witnesses from the neighbors, whom they knew. It stands to reason that when the colony was founded, the authorities settled there at least one or several indigenous families along with the Judean deportees, who formed the majority, in order to instruct the deportees who came from rain-fed Judah. Judah had a rain-fed agriculture. Now, Babylonia has an entirely different type of agriculture, and they don't know the methods. They are not acquainted with palm growing. So the Judeans, the deportees who came from rain-fed Judah, they had to teach them, this family at least, had to teach them the basics of the Babylonian irrigation agriculture, notably the cultivation of date palms. I have an analogy from a very remote period, with a huge chronological gap, almost modern, but with the same rationale. You know that the Tsars of Russia founded colonies, agricultural colonies, in order to settle the Jews from the pale of from Ukraine and from the usually from the townlets where the Tsars of Russia in the 18th century, in the early 18th century, founded colonies, agricultural colonies in southern Ukraine for Jews who originated from townlets and were very poor and had no livelihood. And in every colony, there was at least one or two German colonists, because they were agriculturists, and they were regarded as the most advanced agriculturists in Russia, in Tsarist Russia, not like the Russian muzhik, a peasant who was a primitive, who only subsisted on a primitive agriculture. So this may be the reason. I don't know. I can't prove it, but I have an knowledge. Second, regard the scenarios and loci of the presumed encounters between Judeans and Iranians. In the first place, Persians and Medes. You can't distinguish between Persians and Medes were the ruling class in the Achaemenid period. You can't claim that only the Persians were the ruling class. Of course, the royal family was Persian, but the Medes was on almost the same. They were in the same class. Now I have to hurry a bit. The material is much more limited, scattered, and entirely indirect. The basic assumption is that such encounters were limited to the elites of both ethnic groups, namely the Judeans and Iranians, and the main locus must have been Babylon, which served as one of the Achaemenid capitals and was the destination of high-ranking Judean exiles, as is proven by the earlier documentation about Jehoiakim and his entourage. At the beginning of the Achaemenid rule in Babylonia, descendants of Jehoiakim and of the prominent priesthood of the ruined Jerusalem temple resided in Babylon. Direct evidence, namely documentation of Akkadian and other Aramaic indigenous sources, for the presence of Judeans in Babylon is very limited. Demographically, most Judeans were settled in the countryside. No more than 4 Judeans are so far recorded in the capital of Babylon. But this scanty evidence is due to the hazards of documentation. Palatial archives from the Achaemenid Babylon are not recorded, and very few foreigners are mentioned in the archive of the main temple of Babylon, the Sagila. Besides, Judeans from the province came to Babylon at least once. They came usually to Babylon, but at least once this is recorded, in order to settle their affairs. And they might have brought parties to their transactions from their settlements. And now, several Judeans from Babylonia bore Iranian names. Such names were borne also by at least 2 of the 19 urban clans of Achaemenid Jerusalem, or even more reliable is to label them as Achaemenid Judah, because in Jerusalem was very sparsely populated. Namely Bigwai and Zatu. And there is also the clan of Elam, which might come from Iran, from the Babylonian Iranian Babylonian-Persian border. They might have hailed from Teispid or earlier Achaemenid Babylonia. Their name giving is compatible with the initial enthusiastic expectations of the descendants of the Judean exiles from Cyrus, as well as their gratitude for the fulfillment of his promise to restore the Temple of Jerusalem. The fact that the restoration was in all probability demographically relatively insignificant and not basically affect their positive, didn't affect their positive attitude, because all the restrictions were within the general policy of the Teispids and the Achaemenids towards the conquered population. They did not apply a special policy towards the Judeans. About 650 Iranians and bearers of Iranian names are recorded in Achaemenid Babylonia, a very important satrapy of the empire. On the other hand, very few Iranians are recorded in Achaemenid Palestine. A governor, I don't need to enumerate here them, but this is because the documentation from Palestine, from Achaemenid Palestine, the non-literary, transmitted material from Palestine is next to nothing. What we have is mostly the Wadi Dalit papyri from Samaria. And here and there some scattered the Yahud stamps, but they don't give any information beyond the name of Yahud. Yeah. So there is at least one institution which is recorded in Babylonia. It is also recorded in Samaria. It is also noticeable that at the head of the collegium of judges, we find an Iranian in Samaria, exactly like in Babylonia. We have this institution of kashtu. Kashtu, that's the land for service fief, and everything would point to the same policy, to the same agrarian relations in Samaria and in Babylonia, and by extension in Judah, because Samaria and Judah, they probably had the same. The Achaemenids had the same about the same agrarian policy. Yes. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much. You're probably cited at least every other page in my dissertation, if not almost every page. But I was wondering about when you're talking about the marriage contract, in which Nabubanach, he marries Nanaya Kanata, and she's mentioned as being the daughter of Dibi, who's mentioned as being the daughter of Denaiah, and of course there's a Denaiah who's the son of a Shealtiel. And there, Shealtiel also has a son named Sama. Can you hear? Yeah, she didn't, but I guess
Kathleen Abraham, who edited this document, a very detailed edition, an excellent edition. She was very careful not to label that family, that clan, as non-Judean. But as I demonstrated, they have nothing to do with Judeans. They have no Yavistic names.
No, not necessarily Judean, but I'm just wondering what will you do with names like Shealtiel, if say she were a granddaughter of.
Well, I said that there were Phoenicians there.
Yeah.
This is the crown witness against the assumption that the colony was 100% Judean.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed for this overview. I have two questions. The Big Y and Satu, the names, where do they come from? The Big Y and Satu. This is the two Iranian names. Where do they come from?
Big Y and Satu. Well, we don't know it. They appear, they turn up in the list. Yeah. They turn up in the list of clans. I call them the urban clans of at the beginning, it was thought that they are the urban clans of the capital. But now with the very sparse finds of with a very sparse.
You mean Esra 2? Excuse me, but this is Esra 2 or what? The list?
You mean a big? This is both in Ezra and in Nehemiah.
Nehemiah. So that's what I want to say. Just to be sure, because these names are not from non-biblical sources.
No.
This is not an epigraphic.
Of course, I said that I'm not relying on biblical sources.
I just wanted to make sure.
But in this case, I do rely.
Yeah.
This is a list of
I know.
And a late book.
Yeah, sure.
There's no claim that it's earlier.
Sure. If I may, another question with this overview, but maybe you or Laura can say something about it, because we had a very short chat about that. We see all these Judean names, we see Yahudu and so on. And in a way, it is fascinating to see over more than almost 100 years, through the Babylonian until the midst of the Persian time, these families and clans living there. Yeah. We learned in school and university only the elite was the deportation. What we have here are workers, they work for others. Some are very successful and very rich, obviously, but others had to work. Where are the elites? The literati?
As I said, there are no palatial archives from Achaemenid Babylonia. And in general, from Babylonia, the first millennium, we have palatial archives. Unlike Assyria, in Assyria you have a lot of palatial archives. But in Babylonia, you have only the archive of the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in the Südburg, which mentions Jehoiakim and his entourage and other hostages, other royal hostages as well, but not in Achaemenid Babylonia. Babylon. There you have nothing. You have only the so-called. It's not even this is not 100% sure. The so-called only from context. It is supposed that this is the archive of the main temple of Babylon, Sagila, which used to be a royal temple after the Achaemenid conquest. And there almost no foreigners turn up. So these four Judeans in Babylonia, from Babylonia, they occur as witnesses in some documents, but we have so many other documents from private archives in Babylonia, and very few Judeans are occurred. Foreigners you expect to find in royal palatial archives, because they were brought, they were deported, or deported or brought as experts, and then they were employed in the palatial sector. But if you have no palatial archive, then you find them very rarely.
You don't find them.
No concentration of them. No concentration. But what I'm looking for is compact concentration, compact documentation, compact concentration of material. But this list of 19 clans, at the beginning it was thought that all of them were active in Jerusalem. But now with the very sparse archaeological find from Jerusalem, as it was demonstrated by Finkelstein, it's better to regard them as the clans of Judah, of the land of Judah, the prominent clan of Judah. Yeah.
Any others? One more time. Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.